Is Enzo Fernandez already gone in his head? The truth behind Chelsea's biggest transfer crisis. This summer. Let us be honest with each other for a second. When you watched Enzo Fernandez lift the Club World Cup trophy in a Chelsea shirt, did you ever think that just a few months later we would be sitting here reading his quotes about how much he loves Madrid and how he would love to live there one day? Did you think that the man who cost Chelsea £107 million, the biggest transfer fee in British football history at the time, would be dropping hint after hint on YouTube channels and Spanish television about wanting to leave? Because here we are. And if you are part of the John Chelsea analysis community, you already know this is not just a simple transfer rumor. This is bigger than that. This is about what Chelsea are, what they want to be, and whether the people running this club actually understand the moment they are living in. So let us break this all down properly. No drama, no noise, just the facts, the feelings, and the bigger picture that every Chelsea fan needs to understand right now. Where did all this start? To understand what is happening now, you need to go back to the night Paris Saint-Germain knocked Chelsea out of the UEFA Champions League last month. It was a painful night. Nobody wants to be eliminated from Europe like that. The dressing room was hurting, the fans were hurting, and in the middle of all that pain, Enzo Fernandez sat down for an interview with ESPN Argentina, and instead of saying the things you would expect a vice-captain to say, he left the door open. He did not commit his future. He did not say he was staying. He was vague, and that vagueness was like a spark. Chelsea manager Liam Rosenior tried to calm things down. He said the words had been taken out of context and that people were reading too much into it. Fair enough. That happens in football. Players speak after emotional defeats and sometimes things come out wrong. But then Fernandez did it again. When he linked up with the Argentina national team, he sat down for an appearance on the Avarali's YouTube channel and made it very clear. He said he would love to one day move to Madrid. This was not a slip. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate statement. And then, just when you thought it could not get any louder, he went on Luzu TV and said it for a fourth time in 3 weeks. He told them that if he had to choose a European city to live in, Madrid would be his choice. He talked about how it feels like Buenos Aires, the food, the atmosphere, everything, 4 times, in 3 weeks. At some point, you have to stop calling it a misunderstanding and start calling it a message. What exactly did he say and who else was there? The Luzu TV interview is worth paying attention to because of who was sitting next to Fernandez during it. Franco Mastantuono was there, a young Argentine talent who currently plays for Real Madrid. And when Fernandez said he would love to live in Madrid, Mastantuono confirmed without any hesitation that he would love to have Fernandez as a club teammate. Think about that for a second. This was not just Fernandez talking into a microphone alone. This was a conversation with a Real Madrid player on camera where both of them were essentially saying they would like to play together. If that is not a transfer hint, what is? Fernandez also spoke about Toni Kroos in the same interview. He plays in the same position and talked about how he studies the midfielders he plays against, saying he is particularly impressed by Kroos and Luka Modric. He talked about the quality they have, how incredible they are. He played against Real Madrid at the Bernabeu and clearly left with a deep respect for the club and its midfield. Now, there is nothing wrong with admiring great players. Every professional studies the best in their position. But the timing and the setting of these comments, combined with everything else he had already said, paints a very clear picture. And then Chelsea did something quite telling. They posted a picture of Fernandez on their social media with the caption, "Always Blue," which, if you think about it, is either a heartfelt statement of loyalty or a club desperately trying to convince itself and everyone else that its vice-captain is not about to walk out the door. What is the dressing room saying? Here is where things get even more interesting. According to reports from The Telegraph, Fernandez's comments are starting to annoy some of his Chelsea teammates, and it is not just the Real Madrid talk. The frustration goes deeper than that. During the defeats to Newcastle United and Paris Saint-Germain, Fernandez reportedly had some difficult moments with his teammates. The details are not fully clear, but the suggestion is that he was not exactly spreading positive energy in the dressing room during those tough moments. So you have a situation where the vice-captain is publicly flirting with another club, annoying his teammates behind the scenes, and creating a distraction at the worst possible time in the season. Chelsea are still fighting for a Champions League spot in the Premier League. The FA Cup is still on the table. These are not small things. And then compare his behavior to Moises Caicedo. Caicedo came out publicly and said he wants to become a Chelsea legend. He committed his future to the club without any hesitation. He made his feelings clear and then went out and played football. That is exactly what you want from a senior player during a difficult period. The contrast between the two could not be sharper. And what about Marc Cucurella? He also mentioned the possibility of one day returning to Barcelona, but he handled it completely differently. He made sure to say he was very happy at Chelsea, that any return to Barcelona would be years down the line, and that right now his focus was fully on the club. He left no open doors. He did not create a circus. That is how you talk about your future when your team needs you. Fernandez did the opposite. Is Rosenior in an impossible position? Let us spare a thought for Liam Rosenior here, because this man has been put in an incredibly difficult situation. Rosignor was only appointed manager in January. One of the main reasons Chelsea gave him the job was his reputation as a brilliant man-manager. Someone who could connect with players, get the best out of them, and create a positive environment in a dressing room that had gone through a lot of trauma under various managers. And now, barely weeks into the job, he has to deal with his vice-captain essentially telling the world he would rather be somewhere else. Rosignor tried to protect Fernandez after the first set of comments. He said things had been misconstrued. He put himself out there to defend his player, and then Fernandez went and made the same comments again, making Rosignor look naive for defending him in the first place. That is not fair. That is not the behavior of someone who respects the manager trying to protect him. Now, every press conference Rosignor holds, journalists will ask him about Fernandez. Every time there are fresh quotes from the Argentine, it becomes a story that pulls focus away from football. The manager has to spend time managing a situation that should not even exist right now. The question is whether Rosignor decides to draw a line under it, focus on the rest of the season, and deal with it properly in the summer, or whether he makes a bigger statement, like stripping Fernandez of the vice-captaincy, which would send a loud message to the rest of the squad about what kind of behavior is acceptable. With Reece James still out injured, the captaincy situation at Chelsea is already complicated. The last thing the club needs is more uncertainty at the top of the leadership structure. What would you do if you were Rosignor? Would you strip Fernandez of the vice-captaincy right now, or would you park it until the summer? So who is actually to blame here? This is the part of the conversation where it gets really interesting because the answer is not as simple as just pointing at Fernandez and calling him selfish. Yes, his timing is terrible. Yes, his behavior as vice-captain has been poor. Yes, he has made life harder for his manager, his teammates, and the fans who are trying to stay focused on the end of the season. But let us also look at what Chelsea have given him in return for his loyalty. Fernandez joined the club in January 2023 for £107 million. At the time, that was a record fee in British football. He came in as a World Cup winner who had just won the Best Young Player award at the tournament in Qatar. He could have gone anywhere. He chose Chelsea because he believed in the project. Think about what he walked into. The club was in a mess. They were sitting in the middle of the Premier League table. The ownership had just taken over and was throwing money at the squad without any clear plan. Managers were coming and going. The football was inconsistent. Fernandez stayed through all of it. He ran through brick walls for this club. He kept believing even when the results were not there. And then, finally, something started to work. Enzo Fernandez came in and built something real. Chelsea won the Club World Cup. They qualified for the Champions League. For the first time since BlueCo took over, there was genuine progress. There was a team worth watching. But then the owners fell out with Maresca, and just like that, the most promising moment Chelsea had experienced in years collapsed. The manager who had finally figured it out was gone. Put yourself in Fernandez's shoes. You gave everything for this club. You stayed loyal when others would have run. You finally started to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and then the people in charge made a decision that sent everything back to square one. How would you feel? The real question. Nobody wants to ask. Here is the question that Chelsea fans need to sit with for a minute. Have the owners of this club done enough to deserve the loyalty of a player like Enzo Fernandez? Fernandez is not just any player anymore. He is one of the best midfielders in the world. He is 25 years old. He is in the absolute prime of his career, and he has spent 3 years at a club that has spent heavily, but not always wisely, changed managers too often, and failed to give him the environment he needs to consistently compete for the biggest trophies. Real Madrid are the biggest club in the world. They have won the Champions League more times than any other team in history. If they come knocking for Fernandez this summer with serious money, and every sign suggests they will, that is an offer that any ambitious player would think seriously about. The question is not whether Fernandez wants to leave. The question is whether Chelsea have created an environment where he would want to stay. And the honest answer, based on everything that has happened in the last few months, is that they have not. What does this mean for Chelsea this summer? The summer transfer window is going to be fascinating and uncomfortable for Chelsea in equal measure. If Fernandez leaves, and right now that feels more likely than not, Chelsea will need to replace one of the best midfielders in the Premier League. That is not an easy thing to do. It is not just about spending money. It is about finding a player of that quality who wants to come to a club that is still trying to figure out its identity under a new manager. And here is the bigger problem. If Chelsea cannot keep Fernandez, what message does that send to every other player they might want to sign? This club has spent enormous amounts of money since BlueCo took over. They have built a huge squad, but the reputation of a football club is not just about money. It is about whether top players look at the project and think, yes, I want to be part of that. Right now, Fernandez is essentially telling the world that the Chelsea project is not good enough for his ambitions. That is a damaging message. And if the owners do not respond properly this summer with a clear plan, a committed manager, and the right signings, it will only get louder. The article by Jake Stokes in Football London put it very well. Unless Chelsea scrap their current approach and launch a proper win-now attitude in the summer, they may struggle to sign a world-class player ever again. That is a strong statement, but is it wrong? What should Chelsea do right now? There are basically two roads the club can take. The first road is to accept that Fernandez wants to leave, cash in on him while he still has 6 years on his contract and massive value, and use that money to reinvest in players who actually want to be there. It sounds harsh, but there is logic to it. You cannot build a team around players who have already checked out mentally. It poisons the dressing room. It creates instability. And frankly, if someone does not want to be at your club, forcing them to stay rarely works out well for anyone. The second road is harder but potentially more rewarding. Chelsea could actually sit down and show Fernandez that the project is serious this time. Not with words, not with social media posts saying always blue, but with real action, a clear footballing vision, a manager given proper support, proper world-class signings in the summer, and a genuine plan to compete for the Premier League title, not just fight for a top 4 spot. Because at the end of the day, Fernandez is not asking for that much. He is asking for ambition. He is asking for a project worthy of his talent, and that should not be too difficult for a club with the resources that Chelsea have. The question is whether the owners are willing to actually commit to that, because so far, their track record suggests they are not always great at following through. One more thing worth thinking about. There is a word that has been used a lot to describe Fernandez this week: selfish. And look, the timing of his comments has not been great. He is a vice captain, he has responsibilities, he should understand the impact his words have on his manager, his teammates, and the fans who are trying to stay positive during a difficult run of form. But calling a player selfish for wanting to play for the best team in the world after 3 years of loyalty to a club that has not always rewarded that loyalty feels a little unfair. Real footballers are human beings. They have careers that only last a certain amount of time. They want to compete for the biggest trophies. They want to play in the biggest games. And when a player looks around and sees that his current club is not giving him the realistic chance to do that, it would be strange if he did not at least think about his options. The selfish thing would be to say nothing, take the wages, and simply go through the motions. At least Fernandez is being honest about where his head is at. Whether that honesty is properly timed or appropriately delivered is a separate conversation, but the feeling behind it is completely understandable. Where does this leave Chelsea fans? Honestly, in a complicated place. You can be frustrated with Fernandez for the way he has handled this. You can feel like he has let the club down in a moment when it needed unity. Those feelings are valid, but you can also understand where he is coming from. You can recognize that this is as much a story about the Chelsea ownership failing their best players as it is about a player failing his club. Both things can be true at the same time. What Chelsea fans should really be demanding right now is not just answers about Fernandez. They should be demanding answers about the plan. What is the vision? Who is making the big decisions? What does success look like for this club in the next 3 years? Because if those questions remain unanswered, Fernandez will not be the last player to sit on a YouTube channel and talk about how much he would love to live somewhere else. So, what do you think? Here is where we want to hear from you in the John Chelsea analysis community. Do you think Fernandez should be shown the exit door this summer based on how he has behaved? Or do you believe Chelsea need to do more to convince him to stay? Do you think the ownership deserves the loyalty of their best players given what has happened since they took over? Or do you think players like Fernandez have a responsibility to honor their contracts regardless of what is happening around them? And most importantly, what do you think Chelsea need to do this summer to stop this kind of situation from happening again? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let us talk about it properly, because this is not just a Fernandez story, this is a Chelsea story, and it is one that every single person in this community has a stake in. The bottom line, Enzo Fernandez has not handed in a transfer request. He has not publicly said he wants to leave Chelsea, but he has done something in some ways more damaging. He has made it clear repeatedly and publicly that his heart is somewhere else. Chelsea are under contract with him until 2032. They have every right to keep him, but keeping a player who does not want to be there is not a strategy. It is a slow disaster waiting to happen. The ball is in the owner's court now. They can either rise to the challenge, show Fernandez and the rest of the squad that this project is worth believing in, and go into this summer with genuine ambition. Or they can let this situation drag on, lose their best player for less than he is worth, and watch the cycle of rebuild and collapse continue for another year. Chelsea are too big a club for that. The fans deserve better than that. And frankly, so does a player who gave 3 years of his career to a project that has not always deserved his dedication. It is time for BlueCo to stop talking and start showing, because right now time is running out.